Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy. And this is my Axure 10 Core Skills course. I've been using Axure since February 2011, and I've been teaching it for many, many years. And in fact, I've been one of Axure's recommended trainers since 2014. This course is designed to take you from super Axure newbie or Axure afraid all the way through to confident intermediate. So if you've landed on this one video, there are many, many others. Please check our Axure lessons playlist for a lot more videos about using Axure. The Delta CX YouTube channel has over 500 videos on it as of when I'm recording this in December 2021, and I hope you'll subscribe and join in some of our live streams. I'm live usually 3 or 4 times a week with teaching UX research and design, talking about CX, helping people get into the profession, helping leaders and managers, and of course, don't forget Tuesday, office hours, Ask Me Anything. So subscribe and hang out here. So thanks for being here. Please subscribe and let's jump into that next Axure lesson.
If you're new to the Axure environment, then you're going to want a little help understanding some of the things that exist under these menus. So let's walk through them. Under the File menu, many of these should seem obvious, but there are a few that are a little confusing. First of all, export isn't really an export of your file. It's an export of one of your pages or all of your pages to images. So if you're looking to save any of your Axure pages as images, that's where you would do it. Also, some people don't know that Axure is constantly sneakily backing up. You can set this to happen, you might as well do it, and that way if you have a catastrophic crash, you won't lose more than X minutes of work. And if you do have that crash, you can always come back to recover file from backup, and it should have the most recent backups that it has made. You will also want to notice here's where you're going to deal with libraries and projects, and we'll talk more about team stuff in a moment. You'll also see preferences. Some people think they're used to Photoshop or something. They think that preferences are going to be some huge, huge set of things you have to do when you get Axure. There's actually very few preferences, and most of them are about customizing the user interface for your preferences. So, for example, showing thumbnails, to me, that's a giant yes, which you'll see it in action later, so you'll see what that means. Light mode versus dark mode, up to you. I'm a light mode person. Negative canvas regions, I kind of don't believe in. This is for people who like their pages to look more like artboards, but I'm thinking in terms of web pages, so I don't think of them as having like an off artboard region. I want to see the scroll bars, and I don't want the single key shortcuts. I'm just so old school with Axure that the single key shortcuts mess me up sometimes. But again, if any of these work for you, feel free to customize your stuff that way. Grids and guides and some of these other ones we're going to go into later, but just know that that's what preferences are. They're really about your customization of the UI and not so much the settings for an individual file. Edit is pretty obvious. I do want to mention that Axure's spell check, as of when I'm recording this, as 2021 becomes 2022, their spell check is pretty terrible. I've noticed that it doesn't have a lot of very standard words in it, and you may or may not want to do it. Yes, I suggest spell checking things in Axure. The Axure spell check might not be great, but it's better than nothing. Let's talk about view. Again, this is customizing our user interface, so this is again up to how you like to do it. We've got our main toolbar and our style toolbar. That's these. The top one is the main one, and the second one is the style one. And then you can customize them. The customization is just pretty simple. Do you want to see or not see certain things? So I've got a few things turned off so that I can simplify my toolbar. You can turn them all on. You can do whatever you like. And also we can choose to show labels so that these are a little bit clearer, because I do find sometimes Axure icons don't totally make sense, at least not to me, maybe to you. So that's a little bit about toolbars. Now we're going to do panes in a whole separate lesson, but just know that you can turn all the left panes off. So notice that whole left side disappeared. You can, of course, turn them back on. You can toggle them on and off. You can check off which things you can see and which things you can't see. And you might have also noticed that was available to us in the toolbars. If you have a smaller screen and that's something you're going to do a lot, then you might actually want to add that here. And where did they put it? I think it's here. View left and view right. And so that way, again, if you have a smaller screen, sometimes you need to kind of buy yourself some space and hide these panes. But very often I leave them open. First of all, I'm on a larger screen. And second of all, I don't need to buy back the space, and I use them so much that it doesn't make sense to hide them for too long. Reset view is if you ever feel like, oh man, I lost stuff, I popped stuff out, I moved stuff around. Let's say I dragged this out because you can customize all of where your panes are. I dragged this one onto my second screen and then I accidentally X'd it out and all you need to do is go to view, reset view, and it will put everything back in its original place as if you just reinstalled Axure. So that's what'll always save you. Again, grids and guides will be a later lesson, but you can see they're available in the menu here as well. Masks we're going to talk about more as you see them, but here you can turn them on and off. Now, this is not a mask from the perspective of like Adobe Illustrator or things like that. It's more that there are certain things in Axure that are typically invisible or hard to see. And so Axure puts a soft color over the element so that you can easily see, aha, this has that color over it. It must be this type of object. It must be a hidden object. It must be a dynamic panel. So the masks just help us detect certain components just for our user interface. So the user of the prototype does not see this. And again, you can play around with some of these other settings. At the project level, we have the widget style manager and the page style manager, which will be a separate lesson. We've got notes, which will be a separate lesson. We've got variables, which will be a separate lesson. We've got adaptive views, which are a separate lesson. But just know that you can access these from this menu. Arrange is really common and typical. Nothing special here. If you've used this before in other software or PowerPoint, it all works the same. Alignment, distribution, locking, forward, backward, grouping, ungrouping, and a lot of this is also available on our toolbar. Notice when I did reset view, I lost some of my toolbar settings. So again, depending upon how you like your toolbars, after you do reset view, you might need to come back in here and change some of the things the way you had them. There we go. So let's talk about publishing. This is a little bit more complex in Axure, and again, you can do this from the menu. You can do it from some of the buttons over here in the toolbar, but generally you have 3 different options for publishing. You've got preview, publish to the cloud, and generate HTML files. Now, publish to the cloud assumes that you've already created an account at Axure.Cloud, which is completely free. You might as well do it. And then you can log into it over here. So I've logged into mine. And you can log into yours. And basically, Axure.Cloud is a way for you to publish your prototypes so that they are on some sort of publicly accessible cloud website. You can password protect them, but you will need to check with your company policies that it's okay to put these things out there on a public cloud, even with a password protection. Sometimes you're not allowed. Axure does have an option for you to create a private cloud on your internal servers. So if that's something you're interested in because of privacy or security at your company, talk to sales@axure.com. Talk to them about setting up a private cloud. So let's talk about what each of these 3 can do. And for example, if I hit preview, first let's put some stuff on this screen just so we can see what the heck we're doing. I'll just throw a box and a circle out here for no good reason, but just to have something we can preview. So either from here or shortcut keys or here, I can say preview. And now this will open up in my browser. My default browser happens to be Firefox. Yours might be something else. By default, Axure prototypes, when you publish them, have this bar at the top. And there are ways to hide that bar. So for example, if I click this X, you see it becomes a collapse. And so people might not even know that that's there if they're not familiar with Axure prototypes. If they are, they know that if they mouse over just in that corner, they can have access to this. And in general, we don't want people to have access to this. So we might end up creating prototypes that don't have that. Now, quickly, let's take a look at that, and then we'll circle back. So here are your pages if you need to jump around your own prototype. Here's, of course, your Zoom. This is Notes, which we're going to talk about soon in another lesson. This is the console, which we will be talking about in a later lesson. This is just a setting for whether or not you want to show note markers or hotspots. And the hotspots will put a glow around anything in your prototype that has interactivity. That way, if someone gets to your prototype and they're thinking, I don't even know what I can do here, the show hotspots would create a glow on anything that has interactivity. And show note markers is something that you might be fine with internally, but if you are doing usability testing, you'll certainly want to turn that off so that people are not seeing these things. Now, you might notice that as you are making some changes here, the URL changed for me. So I'm seeing different things, not necessarily here, but when I X this out, I have a different URL. That way, if you want to grab a URL, it's already got some of those preferences in there, like don't show the Axure bar or don't show the notes. But of course, in the case of a preview, you're not going to give anybody this URL anyway. This is the local host. This is your computer, and this link will work for nobody but you. So if we want to share our prototype out to our adoring public, we're going to want to use one of the other two choices, publishing to the cloud or generating HTML files. So let's take a look at publishing to the cloud. Now here, because I'm logged in, Axure says, hey, I'm familiar with your account. You've made all kinds of folders and workspaces. Would you like to publish to one of those? And let's say we put this in the private training folder. Maybe we give it a name. And do we want it to have a password? So that's up to you. We can say that there is a password for this, there isn't a password for this. Just make sure you remember it. You can change it later, and you can have some notes. Do you want people to be able to leave comments? That would be up to you if you're going to use any of Axure's collaboration tools, which we'll look at in the cloud in a moment. Now, all of these settings over here for what to publish and notes and interactions and fonts, these we really do have to take the time to get to know. So first of all, do you want to publish all of your pages? Very often you have a page that is still a work in progress, or just has some of your ideas on it, or with some information architecture that isn't really part of the prototype, and you can say, no, I don't want to publish all the pages. I only want to publish certain pages. Now be careful here. The common mistake is that you do turn off publish all pages, you hand select certain pages, you later create a page, and then it's like, oops, where is my, why didn't that page go into my prototype? Because you forgot to come back and add that one, unless you just want to say publish all. So up to you. Just make sure you are keeping an eye on that, especially if you feel like there's a page missing from your prototype. Notes are whether or not you want your notes, which we'll talk about in a later lesson, to be part of your prototype. Can be good for prototypes you're sharing internally, probably not great for prototypes that are being shared externally or with certain leaders, or maybe your usability testing. You might want to just turn these off so that people can't see them even by mistake. Interactions. Do you want people to be able to see case names? We'll talk about case names later, so this doesn't make any sense yet, but later it will. And clicking widgets will open the reference pages. We'll be talking later about reference pages, so right now this doesn't make sense, but it will probably in our flowcharts lesson. And fonts. We really need to talk about font mapping in Axure because it's absolutely not intuitive. First of all, it's got 2 steps when it should only have 1 step. And second of all, it's something people mess up all the time. Remember, if you are using an embedded font that is unlikely to be on someone's computer, or you're going to use this prototype on a phone, and the font is probably not on a phone, you're going to need to do these font mappings. Now, let me show you the 2 steps you need to do, and just note that in order to correctly map fonts in Axure, you're going to need the font installed on your own computer, and you're going to need CSS for that font. I'll show you what I mean. Let's say we want to add Nunito, a popular font. I can say add font. Now here on font label, I'm giving it a name that I like. This is a name you make up. It can be Nunito, it can be my favorite font, whatever you want to call it. Of course, I will call it Nunito. Now the question is, do you have @fontface CSS code, which you might need to get from your front-end developer if you don't have it, or a link to the CSS, which you might need to get from your front-end developer if you don't have it? We're going to need that there, but I've got this over in Google Fonts. So if I say I want to make sure that by default my regular Nunito is 300 weight or 400 weight, again, up to you. So I'm going to say 300 weight. After I've selected a style, here in Google land, I can come up to this strange icon and I can say that I would like to get the CSS for this. Now for Axure, I don't need all of this CSS. You can give it a try if you'd like, but mostly I come in and let's see, this is my Lato font. We need the Nunito font. And, oh, it's got both of them in it. Okay, let's fix that. I was playing with this one in my last lesson with people. Okay, now this is just Nunito. So you can grab the general font family if you would like, if you don't want to be specific about weights, or of course you can play with grabbing weights. And then I just come back here and I dump that, copy paste, into my CSS. Now that's only step 1. Remember I said this is 2 steps. So for step 2, I've got to say font mappings, and now Axure says add mapping. So why is there this second step? Because now you're teaching Axure, hey Axure, there's a font on my computer. It's Nunito. And you can pick certain styles or weights if you would like. And now you're mapping it to the font family. What do you type here? The name you made up for the font in the last step. Now, sometimes people don't do this step and it works because, hey, I named it Nunito. It's called Nunito on my computer. Axure put 2 and 2 together. But just to be safe, it's good to do this first part to link it to your CSS, and then do the second part to link the font on your computer, especially if you're going to deal specifically in any weights, to the font the name that you've given it here. Now, this is set it and forget it. Once you've done all of this, this is good for your Axure file. If you create a new file or open another file, this isn't going to be there. But at least for this file, Axure knows that this is how we're going to spit this out. Now, if you want to save this as a kind of set of settings for your Axure publishing, you certainly can. You can call this a new configuration, and maybe I could come in here and say all pages and say this is a new configuration, and I'm going to call this the all pages configuration and save that. So you can make little sets here and you can call upon them, but remember this is only good for this file. If you have another file, you might have to either import this or save as or start again. So now I can say, let's turn on comments just for fun. Oh, comments enabled. Oh, it was gray and it was enabled. And now let's say publish. And of course, this is all, our entire file is 2 shapes. So that took a very short amount of time. You can see we now get a URL, ujhc1m.axure.com. But let's take a look at what this looks like over in my Axure.Cloud account and what we can do with it from there. So I'm visiting Axure.Cloud and I'm going to log in. And I've previously logged in, so it remembers me. That went well. Now, here is the file we just uploaded because I'm already in my private training workspace, and that was called Core Skills. So if I needed to mess with this file, I can move it to another workspace, rename, duplicate, upload, download. If you can't find your Axure file, you can grab it from here, delete it, things like that. If I click on this, I get more stuff. Now, Axure says, hey, here's what page 1 looks like. Do you want to see it? Sure, I'll take a look. Pretty exciting, thank you. I can inspect it. That would give you information about the CSS. So this brings a little bit of things you've seen from other tools into Axure, where whatever styling you apply to something, you can grab that information from inspect if you want. I'll be showing you later in our widget styles lesson how to make styles that you use globally, styles you use over and over. And of course, you've got your zoom, you've got share. So this is, do we want to bring other people into this workspace? Got an account here from my boyfriend. Please invite us to your workspaces. We've got special links, of course, that you can use and settings for these links. So again, feel free to play around with this. This would be the access code is if you wanted a password here. So we could add a password, we could edit the password. There's all kinds of controls that you have here. And again, these are just worth playing around with. I don't have to tell you too much about them. And then, of course, this is the information panel here. This would be your notes. And this would be comments. So if we wanted to leave a comment about something, we could. I could click on this box. I could leave a comment. And now Axure saying, where do you want this comment? And I could say, I want it over here. And of course, for those of you using other tools, this is going to look pretty familiar. Make sure this box is really a box. I'm not feeling that clever right now. You can, of course, give it some different colors. You can at somebody else who's in the workspace, etc. So now you have that aspect of collaboration where people can leave notes for each other. I would be able to see this, edit it, delete it, mark it resolved, reply to it, etc. And if I watch my email, I think I should have an email that says that I've got a comment, but I have to check on that one as well. So that's some of the collaborative stuff going on in Axure, and these would be settings related to what you're previewing here. So if we want, we can slide back to our cloud universe. And here's our discussions. So remember, this is the comments from the previous screen are now here as discussions. History is a bit of every time somebody has worked on this, what's going on. There's kind of a versioning that's available in Team Project. If you have the pro level of Axure, you're probably not going to see versioning. You have to have the team version that is extra, and everyone on your team has to have team. And then do you want to add plugins? This is really useful because there are some usability testing tools and other tools that say, hey, you're going to need to drop a script into your prototype in order for us to do some testing or whatever on it. And you're thinking, oh man, where do I add that in Axure? It's actually here in the Axure.Cloud. It's not back here in the software or the prototype. This happens in the cloud. So we would say add a plugin. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, do I have to download a plugin? It's not really that. It's anything you're plugging into your prototype Axure sees as a plugin. So where do you want it to be? Inside of the header, usually for a script. Bottom of the body, possibly, or inside a specific dynamic panel in your prototype, up to you. So I could say this is my usability testing code, and then I would be able to copy and paste that here and add it, and it would then be in the header in every page of this prototype, every page. So again, I'm not doing that right now, but that's something that absolutely you could do. And so that's a little bit about the Axure.Cloud. Again, you can organize with workspaces and folders. In general, if you're going to use a team project, which we'll talk about shortly, then you want to make sure that you are inviting people to the same workspace. Everything in that workspace would be accessible by the people on that team. So something to think about. And again, if you want to give this URL out, you now have one, and you might want to give people the password as well. Hey, a quick note about publishing on Axure. You do not need licenses for every person who will see your prototype. You only need licenses for the people who will build the prototype or change the prototype. So you do not need licenses for people who will view the prototype or try the prototype or see it later, as long as you have one of those web addresses or have moved the files to a local drive or shared drive that other people can get. They can absolutely access the published version of the prototype. Axure also has an app that you can download, which will allow you to run a mobile app style prototype inside of what feels like an app for your phone. So again, even those people don't need to have an Axure license. So that was publishing. Oh, one more thing for publishing. Sorry, generate HTML files. Generate HTML files looks a lot like publishing to the cloud, where we have these groups of settings where we can decide how we want to publish and notes and things like that, except this time it's going to spit out a bunch of stuff, which is the best way to describe it, locally to your hard drive or a shared drive that you have access to from this computer. Now, sometimes people do this when they want to have a copy of the prototype and be able to run it locally from their machine, like for a demonstration or some in-person testing. Sometimes we want to publish locally because we're going to FTP this somewhere. We're going to load it up because we're not using Axure.Cloud, but we still want to be able to put this up somewhere in our intranet or our website so that it can be shared with other people. So in this case, you're just picking the folder where you want it, and then you say publish, and if this is checked, it will open up in a browser when it's done. So that's really your third choice for publishing. So again, that was local preview, which are URLs you can't copy and paste because they only work for your computer. There was Axure.Cloud, which again puts it up on that public server. So yes, it's password protected, but you want to make sure you're allowed to do that. And generate HTML files. If you are working on one specific page and you just want to regenerate that page to HTML locally to your computer, you can just pick regenerate current page to HTML versus generating the entire file all over again. But as more people seem to be using the cloud, you'll probably just be doing publish to Axure.Cloud and overwriting the previous one. Again, your generators and configurators are here. So here was our all pages, and here's where we would be able to edit it or make a new one. So Axure calls these generator configurations, but they live here when we go to publish to the cloud or generate our files. Now let's talk briefly about generate word specification. This is something that I have rarely used because every time I tried to use it, it was more work than it was worth, and the people who received the word specification document were not happy to get it. But basically the idea here is that if we have stuff in Axure, we can spit it out to a Word document in case somebody wanted a specification document. So just really quickly, let's imagine I have notes about this. And now that's got a little note number on it. And all we have right now is one page with two shapes on it and a note. And if we said generate word specification, now again, we've got all kinds of choices and configurators that we can create and save. Do you want all the pages in it? Do you want a sitemap list? Are we putting all of our components in there, which in Axure 9 are called masters? Do we want our properties in there? So again, this is up to you. You can play with these different things, but I'll show you what it looks like if we just say yes to the defaults. It opens up Microsoft Word if you have that on your computer. And now we can also generate a table of contents. So we need to click on that and update it. So this is now a 4-page document for one page. So you can see it had a table of contents. It tells you what's your sitemap, so the page tree. And then it says, hey, here's page 1. This is the user interface of it. And here's a note that we found. So you can see that this would generate some sort of specification, but it's got a lot of downsides. Number one, as you start making more pages and more notes and more interactions, this gets wildly long. And people don't love it. But number two, does it really match how we work? Because ultimately, if I give people this document, this is an image. This would be an image of what the first page looks like when people first get there. But our pages are now really dynamic and interactive. And what does it look like on the page when people start doing other stuff? The document doesn't show us. The document doesn't show us every possible moment or state from our file. It just says, hey, when people load it up, here's the stuff, and here's some notes you wrote about it. So to try to correct for that, Axure created something that is called the snapshot widget, and we'll have a separate lesson on that, but the snapshot widget will be, for many people, a better way to do documentation. So hold on, we'll go through that later. For now, we are still going through our menus. So for Team, as I mentioned, Team is a higher level of Axure license. If you got Pro to be cheaper, that's okay, but you're going to miss out on a couple of features, namely team projects and document versioning. Now, I use team projects like mad, so it may or may not be something that interests you or your team, but even as a freelancer, I used it a lot because the idea is if there is more than one person who's going to work on this document at the same time, then you want to use a team project. You don't want to Dropbox this back and forth. You don't want to email this back and forth. You don't want to hope it doesn't get overwritten or corrupted. The idea of the team project is that if your file has multiple pages, different people can check out and check in a page that they're working on. That way, if I check out page 1, it's solely mine. You can't work on it while I'm working on it, and that way we eliminate the possibility of both trying to mess with the same page at the same time. And then at various points in my own work, I can either send changes to the server so you can see them, but you can't change the page, or I can just check in the page or check in everything, and now you could edit the same page I was just working on. I'm not going to go too deep into team projects. There's lots of great tutorials out there on the Axure website that will tell you more about this and how to set it up and how to invite users. I just want to make sure that you know about it and that you know it's a good feature, but that you're only going to get it with the higher level of Axure license, and everybody on your team has to have the team license. If somebody has a pro license, they are not going to have access to these team features. So make sure that if you are interested in Axure Team, you are spending, unfortunately, that extra money to have access to that. And very simply, account is your Axure.Cloud account. So signing in, managing multiple accounts. I do tend to have multiple accounts. So this is really useful for me. Sometimes I will create an account just for a place where I'm freelancing. And that way later on, they'll have access to that email address. I won't have access to it anymore. And they can have access to all of the Axure files that I made. So I think that's the friendly way to do it. So you can have multiple Axure accounts if you want. Again, they're free, so have fun with it. The main thing that I tend to do from the help menu is check for updates and make sure that I'm always downloading the latest version of Axure, which I did before I started this lesson, so it should tell me that I am totally updated. You can see as of when I'm filming this, I'm in Axure 10.0.0.3854, so this is a very early version of Axure 10. Okay, so I think that's the menus. Let's wrap up this lesson for now. And if you'd like to continue on, you can join me next for toolbars.